Section 2 of The Cricket on the Hearth by Charles Dickens. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sage Turtle. The Cricket on the Hearth by Charles Dickens. The cricket, too, had stopped. Somehow the room was not so cheerful as it had been. Nothing like it. "So, these are all the parcels, are they, John?" she said, breaking a long silence which the honest carrier had devoted to the practical illustration of one part of his favourite sentiment, certainly enjoying what he ate, if it couldn't be admitted that he ate but little. "So these are all the parcels, are they, John?" "That's all," said John. "Why, no, laying down his knife and fork and taking a long breath, "I declare I've clean forgotten the old gentleman." "The old gentleman?" "In the cart," said John. "He was asleep among the straw the last time I saw him. I've very nearly remembered him twice since I came in, but he went out of my head again. Hullah! Up there! Rouse up! That's my hearty." John said these latter words outside the door, whither he had hurried with the candle in his hand. Miss Slowboy, conscious of some mysterious reference to the old gentleman, and connecting in her mystified imagination certain associations of a religious nature with the phrase, was so disturbed that, hastily rising from the low chair by the fire to seek protection near the skirt of her mistress, and coming into contact, as she crossed the doorway, with an ancient stranger, she instinctively made a charge, or butted him with the only offensive instrument within her reach. This instrument happening to be the baby, great commotion and alarm ensued, which the sagacity of Boxer rather tended to increase, for that good dog, more thoughtful than his master, had, it seemed, been watching the old gentleman in his sleep, lest he should walk off with a few young poplar trees that were tied up behind the cart, and he still attended on him very closely, worrying his gaiters, in fact, and making dead sets at the buttons. "You're such an undeniably good sleeper, sir," said John, when tranquillity was restored. In the meantime the old gentleman had stood bareheaded and motionless in the centre of the room, "that I've half a mind to ask you where the other 6 are, only that would be a joke, and I know I should spoil it." "Very near, though," murmured the carrier with a chuckle. "Very near." The stranger, who had long white hair, good features, singularly bold and well-defined for an old man, and dark, bright, penetrating eyes, looked round with a smile, and saluted the carrier's wife by gravely inclining his head. His garb was very quaint and odd, a long, long way behind the time. Its hue was brown all over. In his hand he held a great brown club, or walking-stick, and striking this upon the floor it fell asunder and became a chair, on which he sat down quite composedly. "There," said the carrier, turning to his wife, "that's the way I found him, sitting by the roadside, upright as a milestone, and almost as deaf." "Sitting in the open air, John?" "In the open air," replied the carrier, "just at dusk. Carriage paid, he said, and gave me 18 pence. Then he got in, and there he is." "He's going, John, I think." "Not at all. He was only going to speak." "If you please, I was to be left till called for," said the stranger mildly. "Don't mind me." With that he took a pair of spectacles from one of his large pockets and a book from another, and leisurely began to read, making no more of Boxer than if he had been a house lamb. The carrier and his wife exchanged a look of perplexity. The stranger raised his head, and glancing from the latter to the former, said, "Your daughter, my good friend?" "Wife," returned John. "Niece?" said the stranger. "Wife," roared John. "Indeed," observed the stranger. "Surely very young." He quietly turned over and resumed his reading, but before he could have read 2 lines, he again interrupted himself to say, "Baby yours?" John gave him a gigantic nod, equivalent to an answer in the affirmative delivered through a speaking trumpet. "Girl?" "Boy!" roared John. "Also very young, eh?" Mrs. Peerybingle instantly struck in. 2 months and 3 days. Vaccinated just 6 weeks ago. Took very finely. Considered by the doctor a remarkably beautiful child. Equal to the general run of children at 5 months old. Takes notice in a way quite wonderful. May seem impossible to you, but feels his legs already. Here the breathless little mother, who had been shrieking these short sentences into the old man's ear until her pretty face was crimsoned, held up the baby before him as a stubborn and triumphant fact, while Tilly Slowboy, with a melodious cry of "Catcher! Catcher!" which sounded like some unknown words, adapted to a popular sneeze, performed some cow-like gambols around that all-unconscious innocent. "Hark! He's called for, sure enough," said John. "There's somebody at the door. Open it, Tilly." Before she could reach it, however, it was opened from without, being a primitive sort of door, with a latch that any one could lift if he chose, and a good many people did choose, for all kinds of neighbors liked to have a cheerful word or two with the carrier, though he was no great talker himself. Being opened, it gave admission to a little, meagre, thoughtful, dingy-faced man, who seemed to have made himself a great coat from the sackcloth covering of some old box, for when he turned to shut the door and keep the weather out, he disclosed upon the back of that garment the inscription G&T in large black capitals, also the word glass in bold characters. "Good evening, John," said the little man. "Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, Tilly. Good evening, Unbeknown. How's baby, mum? Boxer's pretty well, I hope?" "All thriving, Caleb," replied Dot. "I am sure you need only look at the dear child for one to know that."
"And I am sure I need only look at you for another," said Caleb.
He didn't look at her, though. He had a wandering and thoughtful eye which seemed to be always projecting itself into some other time and place, no matter what he said, a description which will equally apply to his voice.
"Or at John for another," said Caleb. "Or at Tilly, as far as that goes, or certainly at Boxer." "Busy just now, Caleb?" asked the carrier. "Why, pretty well, John,"
he returned, with the distraught air of a man who is casting about for the philosopher's stone, at least.
"Pretty much so. There's rather a run on Noah's Arks at present. I could have wished to improve on the family, but I don't see how it's to be done at the price. It would be a satisfaction to one's mind to make it clearer which was shams and hams, which was wives. Flies ain't on that scale, neither, as compared with elephants, you know. Ah, well. Have you got anything in the parcel line for me, John?"
The carrier put his hand into a pocket of the coat he had taken off, and brought out, carefully preserved in moss and paper, a tiny flower-pot.
"There it is,"
he said, adjusting it with great care. "Not so much as a leaf damaged, full of buds." Caleb's dull eye brightened as he took it and thanked him.
"Dear, Caleb," said the carrier. "Very dear at this season." "Never mind that. It would be cheap to me, whatever it cost," returned the little man. "Anything else, John?" "A small box," replied the carrier. "Here you are." "For Caleb Plummer," said the little man, spelling out the direction. "With cash." "With cash, John? I don't think it's for me." "With care," returned the carrier, looking over his shoulder. "Where do you make out cash?" "Oh, to be sure," said Caleb. "It's all right. With care. Yes, that's mine. It might have been with cash, indeed, if my dear boy in the golden South Americas had lived, John. You loved him like a son, didn't you?" "You needn't say you did. I know, of course." "Caleb Plummer. With care. Yes, all right. It's a box of doll's eyes for my daughter's work. I wish it was her own sight in a box, John." "I wish it was, or could be," cried the carrier. "Thank'ee," said the little man. "You speak very hearty. To think that she should never see the dolls, and them a-staring at her so bold all day long. That's where it cuts. What's the damage, John?" "I'll damage you," said John, "if you inquire. Dot, very near?" "Well, it's like you to say so," observed the little man. "It's your kind way. Let me see, I think that's all." "I think not," said the carrier. "Try again." "Try again." Something for our governor, eh? Said Caleb, after pondering a little while. To be sure, that's what I came for, but my head's so running on them arks and things. He hasn't been here, has he? Not he, returned the carrier. He's too busy courting. He's coming round, though, said Caleb, for he told me to keep on the near side of the road going home, and it was 10 to 1 he'd take me up. I'd better go, by the by. You couldn't have the goodness to let me pinch Boxer's tail, for half a moment, could you?
Why, Caleb, what a question!
Oh, never mind, ma'am, said the little man. He mightn't like it, perhaps. There's a small order just come in for barking dogs, and I should wish to go as close to natural as I could for 6pence. That's all. Never mind, mum.
It happened opportunely that Boxer, without receiving the proposed stimulus, began to bark with great zeal. But as this implied the approach of some new visitor, Caleb, postponing his study from the life to a more convenient season, shouldered the round box and took a hurried leave. He might have spared himself the trouble, for he met the visitor upon the threshold. End of Chirp the First, Part 2. Read by Sage Turtle of QuirkyNomads.com.